This week on the Frame Savers, Schwarzenegger vs. Stallone 2, Electric Boogaloo. This is episode 77 of the Frame Savers. Fun fact, Chad, did you know that 77 backwards is 77?
Whoa, that's
Yeah.
crazy. How many episodes is it going to be until we get another crazy situation like that again?
Probably never. Probably never. Haley's Comet just hit. If you are new to us, we are the Frame Savers. We are a retro video game podcast that focuses on speedrunning. Speedrunning is beating video games as quickly as possible using whatever tricks, glitches, and stratagems available to you. And right now, we are live on twitch.tv/the Frame Savers. So shout outs to chat. We're real excited to be doing a Bad Games episode, actually, Bad Games number 10, our 10th Bad Games episode. Before we dive into what that's going to be about, what you been up to, bud?
Oh, I've been playing all the video games. I didn't play very
Nice.
many this weekend though because you were actually hanging out at my house.
I was at your house. You were also at your house.
Can you believe that the two of us together actually equaled fewer video games than usual?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. We don't always agree on video games, and we just wanted to take it easy. We wanted to enjoy each other's company. We had fun time. We did a little
Mhm.
putt-putt.
We
We
did.
did a little Jackbox on Skybill's stream.
We did.
We did a little bit of podcast work. I don't know. It was
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, we did some planning. It was fun. You know, there was laughs had, a giggle here and there.
Yeah, I've been on the keto for 3 weeks,
Oh,
and I was
yikes.
good. I was good while I was visiting you. I had one cheat meal. I had some pizza. It was glorious. In 3 weeks since I had carbs, and I stayed strong. I'm proud of myself for that. But yeah, we had a good time. I just got back like 20 minutes ago, and now we're back to work already. We got to get back to the hustle.
Hey, it's all about that grind, you know?
Have you been
Showing up.
speedrunning any games before I got there?
Yeah, I mean, I've been playing kind of off and on the Star Wars Episode 1 Phantom Menace for the PlayStation 1 because of the 12-hour challenge, which went really smoothly. I was surprised. I didn't think that I was going to succeed at the 12-hour challenge. I have this tendency of picking really ambitious games, and then the day comes and I'm a few hours into it and I say there's not a chance that I'm actually going to finish this game. And by the end of it, I managed to eke out a passable run. I mean, an hour compared to a world record of like 40 minutes. It's a ton of fun. It's a cool game. Apparently, I guess I inspired the world record holder to come up with some new strats. There's some new stuff going on now with the game, but otherwise nothing specific. I guess I have some speed plans coming up, but I haven't been playing a lot in the past week or so.
You've always been my inspiration, Chad.
Thank you,
Always.
John.
Yeah. I've been speedrunning a little known game called Zen, the Intergalactic Ninja on the Game Boy. That was semi my 12-hour challenge, but semi spoilers, part of Cart Swap, which is going to be coming up soon, where me and Chad trade games. And I had a lot of fun running the game that you gave me. Had bad controls, but it was fun. And so we'll be talking a ton more about that coming about 2 weeks, I guess. But we've got some events coming up as well that you can check out until that episode. We've got the UK Speedrunning Marathon, August 17th and 19th. That's raising money for Special Effect, which provides gaming equipment for accessibility. So that's really cool. You can find that at twitch.tv/UKSM Live. And we also got BSG, which is Benelux. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah, Benelux.
Wow.
It's
What a scholar. Am I a Rhodes Scholar? Or?
You are. I'm I'm an American, so I know nothing, but apparently that term is the term that's used for the combination of Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg, like that three-country area, and they have their own speedrunning meetup. It's actually, if you're not familiar with BSG, Benelux Speedrunner Gathering, they basically put on a monthly marathon. So
Oh
they're
wow.
constantly putting on these relatively high production value marathons all the time. As soon as one ends, they're already planning the next one, and this is their big bash. So this is the annual 2018 marathon, and that's happening August 19th through the 25th, and that you can find that at twitch.tv/bsg_marathon.
Wow. So speedrunning is just running rampant in Luxembourg. There's just too many people, too big of a country, and they said we just need to fill it with speedrunning all the time.
I'll have you know that in high school, I did a project on Luxembourg
Oh
where I did a
wow.
lot of research on them. And fun fact, as of the research that I did when I was in high school, their army was 300 people.
Wow. Did you make a diorama or anything?
No, I made some Venn diagrams, but that is a very different thing.
Wow. Wow. What a smart dude. So this week we are talking about Bad Games number 10. And as I alluded to in the intro, Stallone versus Schwarzenegger. If you remember back at, was it Bad Games number seven,
No,
six?
four.
Four,
Yeah.
we did Cliffhanger versus Predator. It was a
Mm-hmm.
Stallone versus Schwarzenegger matchup. And we realized since then there's a lot of games with both of these people in it. A lot of games based off of Stallone movies and off of Schwarzenegger movies. And so we've realized that maybe some of these Bad Games episodes can be a little bit themed. And so I'm excited. I'm personally a Stallone fan. I grew up with both, but being the big Rocky fan that I am, I mean, the guy solved the Cold War for us. I can't turn my back on him. But it's
He
tough.
was
It's
there
tough
when
to
we needed him most, and it's
yeah.
our time now to be there for him.
Yeah, but lots of great action movies in the 80s and 90s by these two. I mean, I would say Shakespearean level actors and of course inspired some of the best video games ever made. So how could we not talk about them? It's almost impossible to avoid.
And they both went on to pretty great things. Schwarzenegger went on to be a governor, and
Mhm.
Stallone went on to be in The Expendables. So
Yeah.
they both,
Stallone went on train Apollo Creed's son. So I mean, that's a big deal, right?
wow,
Yeah. So I
that's
mean,
a real turn of
yeah.
events there.
Yeah. So, anyways, we're gonna take a quick break. We're gonna go through these two games, and then we'll see. I think the first one, Schwarzenegger won. Will he be able to keep the crown? Only time will tell.
So the first game that we're talking about is Conan the Mysteries of Time. And if you're not familiar with this game, you've done well so far. This was developed by System 3 and published by Mindscape in 1991 for the NES. And it's actually a direct adaptation of a game called Myth History in the Making for the Commodore 64, ZX Spectrum, and Amstrad CPC. That was also created by System 3, which is a company that was known for The Last Ninja, if you're familiar with that game. Sort of a all-star lineup they've got going on there. And in the game Myth History in the Making, you play as a teenage boy thrown back in time from the 20th century who must face the hordes of monsters under the control of Dameron, the Dark Angel of Time, in order to be returned home. So shortly after that game released, they re-released the game for the Amiga, and the main character was changed to a character named Ankalagan, who is an ancient warrior from the year 63 AD who uses the power of Stonehenge to once again defeat the Dark Angel Dameron. And this game was actually really pretty. The Amiga version, I was really surprised because I was looking up all of these other versions, and while the version that was for the Commodore 64 and the ZX Spectrum weren't particularly easy on the eyes, just like the NES version, the Amiga version looks really great, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but it's kind of surprising considering the year that this came out, 1991, that they would go with the NES and that sort of lower powered graphics versus doing it on the Super Nintendo, where you could really pretty faithfully adapt the Amiga version to it.
Sure. Okay, so I have a question and I also have a fun fact.
Okay.
Fun fact: Ankalagan was the third most common name in the 80s
That's true.
in America.
Mhm.
Citation needed. And the second question is, didn't Mindscape make a bunch of other games?
Yeah,
Not the best games.
yeah, Mindscape actually has a pretty good. I have a tab open here with like the list of every Mindscape game, and I was
Mm-hmm.
shocked at how many of these are actually really solid games. It's like
Okay.
going all the way back. It's like Deja Vu, Uninvited, Shadowgate. So
Okay.
some games I really love. They did Mavis Beacon Teaches Typing, which honestly you could be on the fence about. I don't care. Paperboy and Prince of Persia. They did both of
Okay.
those. They did Sim Earth and Sim Ant. They
Sim
did.
Ant, solid. You got to live your life as an ant. That's great.
I know I don't really get Sim Ant.
No, I love it.
That's not even in relation to this conversation. It's just I don't understand Sim Ant.
Sure.
Captain Planet and the Planeteers. I've got a few
Okay.
others here, like Prince of Persia 3D, Billy Hatcher and the Giant Egg, which is a pretty rad game.
I've never heard of that, but it's a pretty good list of games. I was expecting a much worse list of games.
Yeah, I mean, I'm skipping over some stuff. Like, they did Willow for the Amiga. They did the Roadrunner that was for the Commodore 64. They've got some rough ones in here. I mean, I don't mention Captain Planet and the Planeteers kindly.
Sure. Sure. I mean, they really missed out on an opportunity to create Minesweeper, though, I feel like. Just with the
Oh.
name. I feel like it would have been a nice fit.
That's a good point.
So that's my
should've-
interjection.
It should have been. It should have been them. They
Absolutely.
had first right of refusal on that property when it
They
came
blew
time to port Minesweeper over to the N64.
Yeah, they're like, it's half our name, so who's going to argue against that?
Exactly.
Lawyers?
So finally, Mindscape took this game that had been created. System 32 had worked in collaboration with Mindscape on a lot of these
Wait,
projects.
System 3 or System 32?
Sorry, I don't know if I said System 32, but I meant System
Okay.
3.
Okay.
So System 3 had made this game, and they were basically contracted by Mindscape to remake it for the NES, and the main character was changed to Conan the Barbarian, which is really strange. It was sort of apropos of nothing, since there was no Conan movie that had come out even somewhat recently. The two Conan movies in the 80s were from 84 and 86, and this game came out in 91. So it doesn't seem like they were trying to piggyback on the success of any film or any other property. I literally could not find a Conan thing that was from this time. I looked at novels, I looked at movies, I couldn't find anything. There was another 1991 game based on Conan the Barbarian, but other than that, there's just nothing based on Conan. So it's really surprising that they would choose to make this game at this time. It seems to really be nothing more than just trying to bring the game Myth to the NES. I guess they felt like the game was good and successful and should be brought to the NES as well. But it seems like a strange choice to go with that NES since it was 1991. I mean, even if development on this game had started back when Myth had released, which was in 1989, at that point, development kits would have probably already been available for the Super Nintendo for people to start making games. So you would have thought that they would have wanted to go with the higher powered Super Nintendo. I mean, the game is just horrific to look at.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like
So
they're looking like a DOS game.
After we decided to pick this game, is it a stretch to connect this game to Arnold?
It feels like more of a stretch now. At the
Than
time,
that we expected.
yeah, I think at the time we were really convinced that Conan the Barbarian only made sense if it was being attached to a movie, and then finding out after the fact that it had nothing to do with any of the movies was a rude awakening.
It was a kick in the pants,
It
if
really
you will.
was.
What wasn't the cartoon really popular or something later? I feel like I
Was
don't
there
know
a-
much about Conan, but who am I thinking of? Isn't Conan the Barbarian like a
Are you
cartoon
confusing
and
with
toys in the
He-Man
90s?
or something?
No, I mean maybe I am. Maybe I am.
Maybe
I
there
don't
was
know.
a Conan cartoon that I'm forgetting, and maybe it was around this time, and maybe that's exactly what this is. Maybe that's what I'm forgetting. So the plot of the game that was brought to the NES was you control Conan, ordained by the gods to destroy various mythological creatures under the control of, yet again, Dameron. It looks like they were really attached to this Dameron character. They had no intentions of trying to change that to fit the Conan universe better, so...
Sure, he seems like a troublemaker for sure. And chat saying that the cartoon did come after, so probably not inspired by the cartoon either. It's called Conan the Adventurer, apparently. So,
Right.
who knows? Who knows why they made this game? And I think we'll continue to learn that maybe they shouldn't have. So, continue.
Yeah, so this game was an adventure platformer. Each level has a theme, such as Hades or Egypt or Greece, with the intent of encountering some great mythological creatures such as Cerberus, Medusa, Thor, and a Hydra. And the general premise of each level is you're looking for some items or some thing you can do in the level that is going to allow you to beat the boss. Usually bosses are not just, run up and wail on them. You need to find some specific item hidden somewhere. Some ancient ritual is going to uncover the item you need. It's never freely given. You always have to work for it. So you're looking for these items that will give you the ability to progress. Usually it's as simple as finding the right item to attack the boss with, and they'll just die. But it's just a very small number of pretty cryptic levels. And the more I sort of watched runs of this and was getting it into my head, the more I realized that this is a lot like Escape from Atlantis in that sense. The game is not communicating to you in any way what the expectation is. In the first level, you're in Hades, and Cerberus is blocking your way. If you try to attack Cerberus, nothing happens. If you try to run past Cerberus, you just instantly die. And the game expects you to find a sword first, which you can only find a sword from punching enough skeletons and one of them dropping it. Then you have to cut down a skeleton that's hanging from the ceiling. Once you've cut down that skeleton, if you knock him off into the fire, then that spawns a devil. And once that devil spawns, killing it will give you a pitchfork, which is the only weapon you can use to kill Cerberus. So pretty much exactly what you'd expect from walking into Hades.
Sure. So you didn't find that to be something the game, telegraphed to you through the gameplay?
No, absolutely not. The plot of this game, I kind of described it, but I described it in the framework of the history in the making game. The game really doesn't communicate to you even what the plot is. The manual does a horrible job with communicating what the plot is. The manual starts with 9 pages of story.
You think that would mean that it would be very clear what the plot is, right?
Right.
That's longer than anything I've ever read.
Yeah, I know that. And even these notes. And the manual is basically just a dialogue, presumably between Conan and some other wiser person, where he just sort of rambles incoherently about a throne that he's trying to win back, the throne of Aquilonia, and something about, like, you're going to encounter monsters, but it doesn't explain to me why I'm doing any of these things. It's very...
So it's similar to the podcast. You have one person rambling on and on towards a wiser man, which I'm going to put you in that role at this point.
Yes.
And that's basically... So it's basically the podcast is this video game. And that's all you're willing to look up. Is I see in the notes you have given up. This is the point you hit, and you said, no.
I literally wrote into the notes, this is all I'm willing to look up.
Yeah.
I'm certain that a better podcaster could have searched out what the entire backstory of Conan is to try to piece together this narrative, but not me. I am not that one. So I don't know what to tell you. So if you've ever played this game, the controls are awful. Let me paint a picture for you. Now, if you read the manual and you find the controls page, abandon hope, all ye who enter here, because it's basically just a list of what button combinations do what, but it's not really framed in any useful way. So, sort of just framing this in terms of someone who's playing the game for the first time, you're going to kill an enemy and you're going to see an item on screen, and you want to pick that item up. Well, unlike a lot of games, just touching the item does not pick it up. That doesn't help you. So you think to yourself, that's fine, I've played a game like this. Certainly I have to press a button to pick it up. But none of the buttons are going to make it pick up either. So you think to yourself...
No, that wouldn't make sense.
So you think to yourself, I probably need to crouch. That's the next most obvious thing to do whenever I need to pick up something off the ground. So what's your first instinct? Well, by this point, you've probably already hit the jump button, which is up. So once you've hit the jump button, you know that up is jump. So what is down going to do? Well, of course, down is also jump. Down is also very obviously a jump button. And so you think, well, I'll check the A and B buttons, but both A and B are attack buttons. A is an attack, and then consequently B is also itself an attack button. And so then you have to figure out, well, how am I going to crouch down to pick it up? The controller only has so many buttons. Select pauses the game to pull up your menu, and start does literally, who knows, it could maybe be a win the game button, but I don't know. It doesn't work when I hit it. And so the manual tells you that the correct answer is down and A at the same time. And even once you know that information, it's not good enough. It's not just a matter of pressing down and A at the same time. They have to be hit at the exact same split second. If you hit them even slightly out of order, you're either going to hit down a frame earlier, which means you're going to jump, or you're going to hit A first, which means you're going to attack.
Do you think this is a good mechanic or?
I enjoyed playing it
Sure,
for the few minutes I played it before I threw my controller. Um,
sure. I
I don't
mean,
know.
I don't know. Are we going to do our standard reviews of this?
We can
We
do our
dive into
standard.
controls, or I was just going to say this is kind of the type of game where you just hop into it, you put it in for like 90 seconds, and then you moved on to another game. Like I can't imagine anybody, unless some kid got this and like that's the only game they had, and they didn't have any other games to go back towards. Like this is the kind of game I would put in as a kid and play for literally a minute or two, and just be like, nope,
I mean,
I don't get it.
we can skip right ahead. I'm giving this a 0.5. This is my 0.5 game.
Wow. 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 Shots
Let
fired.
me put it this
Well,
way. As someone who loves bad games, my only desire to play this game is just so that I can fight my way through the bad controls. But there's nothing charming about the game on its
yeah.
own. There's nothing fun about fighting against just the basic movement mechanics. I shouldn't have to fight in order to jump. I shouldn't have to fight in order to crouch. Those should all just be single button presses, especially considering there's an up button and a down button that are both mapped to jump. It's
Shout
just
outs to our chat who should be spamming our sub emote, which is a point 0.5 out of 10 emote. It literally is me raising a sign that says point 0.5 out of 10. This is the best chance to use it, right? I mean, we're
this
not
is
going to get many of these.
This is the only chance you'll ever see me give a game a low score, because even the worst games I have a tendency to love. And what's so strange is that usually I really love super janky games, and this
Sure.
game is a super janky game, but somehow it defies expect. You know how sometimes they say like a bad movie is so bad that it becomes good again? This
Yeah, I love
game
bad movies.
this game is so bad that it became good again and then got worse and became bad a second time.
Oh, wow.
It's
Wow.
that awful.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I would note, I mean, so we kind of talked about the graphics. The graphics are really bad. In
They
terms
really
of
look like a
this is
DOS game
19.
almost.
I mean, they would not be bad if it was like an 84, 85 game, right? But for 1991, this is ridiculously bad. I think the graphics have a bit of charm to it because it does remind me of the DOS era. So I don't know if that's a positive for
That
the
is
game
not
or
a
its rating,
compliment.
but DOS platformers, it gives you a little nostalgia.
I don't think that
Um,
any NES game should look like it has EGA graphics. It's really, really rough. Like every pixel looks like they just stretched it out 4 pixels wide, and so it's got that really old school EGA graphics look to it,
mm,
where
sure.
they didn't have the choice to make things look really polished, and in this case, they just chose not to make things look polished.
Sure. What about the music? There is music? No? Yes?
There is. It's not good.
Okay.
The title screen is the best song in the entire game, but as soon as you dismiss that, then you're just suffering.
It's always the best. It's always the best when they get the good music out of the way in the beginning. Yeah, one thing I was going to just kind of comment on the controls is interesting because I didn't realize Mindscape was behind this, who also made Prince of Persia, but the jumping is very similar to Prince of Persia. Like the multiple frames of animation and then like the very distinct distance on the jump and kind of no control over it once you leave. It really reminded me of Prince of Persia. I'm sorry, which I grew up playing a lot as a kid on DOS. So I mean that's not a positive because I think that mechanic works well for Prince of Persia because it's very particularly tied to the puzzles of that game, like the
Right.
whole jump mechanic and the way the animation frames are like kind of taking you time or whatever. Most of the tricks and are not tricks, but most of the puzzles and the different things are kind of designed around that mechanic. This game just feels like they tried to throw that into a normal platformer, and so just makes it twice as difficult. But yeah, it's not a good game. I haven't played it enough to give the rating, and I just want to support you, so I'm gonna give it a 0.5. I
Yeah,
want to support you.
it's such a bizarre game because it's exactly like you said, and the reason why I think you get that Prince of Persia feel to it is because if I'm not mistaken, the up button jumps straight up and you can control it a little bit with left and right. There is some
Uh,
mobility, but the down button is always a forward jump of a pre-described angle.
yeah,
And so the down button really feels like a Prince of Persia jump, where as soon as you
yeah,
jump, you know exactly what your arc is, and controlling the jump is just a question of where did you jump from, not
yeah.
how did you control it in midair. So,
Which makes this game very difficult when it starts off with just a bunch of platforms hovering over burning fire that's
hmm
supposed to kill you. Like it does not ease you into at least learning this mechanic in some simple designed level. It just puts you on these platforms where if you fall off, you die. and then it doesn't even give you the weapon that you really need. I mean, you have your fists, I guess,
Hmm.
but you have no idea what you need to do. At no point, there's no text, there's nothing that telegraphs this to you. And then, well, I mean, what are some of the later levels like for anybody who maybe played this game as a kid, got to this, was it Cerberus? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
And that was it, which is probably 99.9% of people who played this. Does it get any better?
So, I mean, one of the later levels is literally just running against a never-ending horde of Roman soldiers. And once
Mm-hmm.
you get to the very end of it, there's a woman at the end of the line who, if you walk past her, she turns into a snake and kills you instantly. But you have to know to just hit her 20 times
Sure.
in order to kill her. There's other levels of different types. The Egyptian level, I think, is probably the best design level. The
Mm-hmm.
Egyptian level, when you're inside the pyramid, there's these sort of twisting catacombs, and you're trying to find these 4 magical urns. And so you have to like go to all the corners of the pyramid and destroy the pots to see whether or not it drops one of the little magical urns. But in general, I feel like it communicates its expectations pretty well. It looks exactly like you'd expect it to look. I will say one thing though: the jumping being as rough as it is, a lot of the platforms are extremely wide. There's very few very precise jumps. None of them
Sure.
are sort of you have to jump from the last possible
It
moment
gives you the
here.
room to set it up properly, but it's
Right.
just a terrible mechanic in terms of
Absolutely.
feeling like you're in control of your character or enjoying the platforming in any way, for sure. And
For sure.
especially with enemies in the way, enemies attacking you at all on all platforms, it's pretty frustrating. We know your feelings about the game. Are there any at least good ideas in the game that they could have possibly just done better with?
I,
Like,
I'm
you're a pretty optimistic person. I'm wondering, is there anything later in the game? Obviously, it didn't do it well, but is there any like little kernel of hope inside it?
Yeah, I love puzzle games. I really do. Like we've joked multiple times about my experience with Escape from Atlantis, and
Sure.
that game did just as poorly of a job of communicating what the puzzle was. But I really like that each level has sort of a brand new concept. And I
Yeah.
feel like a game that communicated with you and said you might want to try to do this or you need to find that. That sort of communication that sort of leads you but doesn't just tell you what you need to do at all times. I feel like a game like that with some cryptic puzzles could be a lot of fun. I mean,
Sure.
I'm currently fighting my way through La Mulana. I love puzzle games, and
Yeah.
so if it was just something along the lines of as soon as you encounter Cerberus, a text box pops on screen, and you hear either Cerberus's voice or some mystic voice saying, you won't be able to defeat him without the pitchfork. Then I know not to run past him, and now I have a new goal. My goal is to find a pitchfork,
Sure.
and so I might
Like,
think,
even if it said in the beginning, like, find the pitchfork to kill Cerberus, and that's it. At least you would have some sort of direction as to, like, oh well, I killed the skeleton. That's only a sword. That's not what I need to use. How do I, what do I do to fix this? Or
right.
cut down the skeleton to find the key. Some sort of even like vague Zelda 1 level hint would have been nice to just kind of guide you along. So, unfortunately, not a great game, but we've got to take a break and just try and think if the speedrun can even make it a little bit better.
So before we jump over to a remarkably better game, I do sort of want to talk about this in the context.
Spoilers.
Yeah, sorry, we're talking about a different game after this one. But I do want to talk about the speedrun because it does have a little bit of interesting stuff in it. Now, when I was first starting speedrunning, I remember watching a speedrunner named Extra Guy working on this game. He was a buddy of mine, and he ran a lot of kind of bad games. I actually ended up running a lot of his games because of watching him play them. And at the time, he had run Conan, and it was kind of an interesting run. At the time, he had something like a 13-minute run. It was a strange game. I knew I didn't really want to go into it myself, but it was an interesting game on its own. And now, at this point, the game has been optimized quite a lot since then. So the world record is separated between console and emulator due to a few pretty small differences. I feel like this is an unusual thing to happen. It's
Sure,
not.
yeah.
It's not because of lag. From what I understand, when played on an emulator, this game has a little bit of difference in the way its enemies spawn. It might be some sort of bug, but the two main runners who run this game, White Hat and Tarbash, both decided rather than just disqualifying either, they would separate the leaderboards and just make it fair for everyone. So the console world record is a 9-minute and 20-second run by White Hat 94. And this run's about 2 years old. It doesn't have all of the same tricks or optimizations that are in the emulator world record, which is remarkable 6-minute and 38-second time.
Wow.
And a lot of
How
this,
much of that difference is this enemy spawn rate?
so
And how
it,
much of it is new strats or stuff that's been found out in the last 2 years?
So the difference in enemy spawns really only affects the first level significantly, so it's probably only a difference of something like 10 seconds for that alone.
Oh, okay.
But
Wow.
Tarbash has found a lot of new skips and strats in the game that have helped push it down considerably. So what makes the world record good for this game is first off, grinding out for good enemy patterns. There's a few levels where what patterns you get from the enemy can make a really significant difference. Notably, for instance, in the Viking level, the levels ended as soon as you kill this crow that's flying around in the sky. And you can't kill the crow until it decides to fly down, and it's more or less random how long it takes that to happen. So just playing through and getting good RNG can make a pretty significant difference. There's also a little bit of out of bounds in the run. I believe White Hat's run has an out of bounds trick in the first level that saves a very small amount of time. But he did have it in. But Tarbash figured out how to use that same out of bounds trick where there's really nothing special to say about it. It literally is just jumping with the right timing at a wall and going straight through it.
Wow.
There's nothing special otherwise. But he figured out a way to use it in the very last level. And the very last level has a lot of really circuitous pathing where you're trying to find all of these magic urns in order to finally get the weapon to drop to kill Anubis so you can go on to the next level. And the world record on emulator just uses this out of bounds trick to skip right through the wall and hit the loading zone to hit the end of the level without having to find the urns or fight Anubis or any of those things, which does make a pretty significant difference. I mean, I would say that the majority of the time save between White Hat's 920 and Tarbash's 638 is just better gameplay and optimization. But those out of bounds do make a pretty big difference, especially considering trying to find all of those urns is a pretty RNG heavy endeavor. So
So if somebody is looking to push down a world record in an NES game, which is not something that's always on the table, right? I mean, the NES world records have been all snatched up for the most part. This might be something to look into. Maybe get White Hat back in the game. You know he'll come back if he gets bopped. I know my boy White Hat.
That's true. That's true. And the last bit of speedrun tech. So what kind of makes that out of bounds interesting in the next to last level is that you do need the urns in the final level. But for whatever reason, probably smartly, if you skip out of bounds and skip the Anubis fight and everything, the game just gives you the 4 urns if you're missing them. So you can use
It expects that you already have them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Which makes me think, or made me think at the time, that the game was just constantly clearing your inventory between levels and giving you whatever items it wants you to have at the beginning of each level. But that's apparently not the case, because the world record also grabs an extra trident drop in the first level and uses that for a little mini boss fight much later in the game where it basically instant kills a boss. So
Probably not even expecting that you'd have that item there.
Right.
Expecting that once you get the pitchfork and kill Cerberus, you're not going to go back and get another one. So that's pretty interesting. The speedrun at least add a little intrigue to your 0.5.
Yeah, I mean, that's where the 0.5 came from.
Okay. So when are you going to start running this, or what's...
Well, it's a really short game that does have some cool tricks. I do think that I probably will run it at some point. I'd always been interested in it from back when I used to watch Extra Guy run it. But after sort of doing the research on the podcast, it kind of looks like a fun run to fight my way through, even if only to just do it one time and get a time on the board, or to take some of the optimizations that have come from the console or the emulator world record holder and put them on console. But I don't anticipate this being a game that I'm going to be all too thrilled to be playing myself. So it's not on my short list. I'll say that much.
You are a broken man, my friend.
I've been
We're gonna go
described
ahead
that way.
and take a quick break, and then we're gonna hop into a different game called Rambo.
So now we have the benefit of talking about a much better game, Rambo for the NES. And you might
Are
think
you implying this is gonna get more than a 0.5?
this one would definitely get more than a 0.5 for
Wow.
me. This
Wow,
game
spoilers.
This game definitely isn't what I would consider a good game. I mean, heck, it's on our Bad Games number 10 episode, but it is a much better. I mean, put it right up against Conan, and this looks like Game of the Year quality.
Absolutely.
So this was developed by Pack-In Video and published by Acclaim. It was released in Japan of December of 1987, which is strange that it came out so much earlier than in North America when it was released in May of 1988, since I would imagine that Rambo is a primarily American property.
Sure.
But that was the case. Pack-In Video is a company that I've always known best for Harvest Moon, so it's kind of funny that they made Rambo as well.
Sure.
Pack-In Video also made another game that I just wanted to mention because of how amazing it is. But it's called Super Rambo Special, which is an MSX Rambo RPG, which looks a lot like Hide Light. You should look this
Wow.
game up. It's something else. But
Did it come out in the U.S. or just Japan?
I
That
think
sounds
it's-
like a very Japanese game.
I think it's just Japan. Which, again, like, I don't understand. Does Japan really love Rambo and I just don't know it? Do they?
Possible.
Are they
I'm
into
just
that?
glad that the notes aren't correct because you said that it came out in December of 2987, which
As soon as I
freaks
saw
me
that,
out a little
I knew
bit.
I would hear about that. As soon as I
Freaks
saw
me
it.
out a little bit. I know AI is starting to become a thing, and I just didn't know. I didn't know maybe something had happened.
Here,
I
let me
didn't hear
fix
about,
that for you.
So this is based on the 1985 film Rambo: First Blood Part 2. So I think that's the second Rambo movie.
Yep, Rambo 2.
Came out the year I was born. Great year for America and the world, really. The Nintendo came out in the U.S. and I came out in the U.S. So, I mean, what else can you ask for?
So basically, you're Rambo.
Absolutely.
Or
So
Rambo 2.
after the dramatic events of the first movie, Rambo is taken into custody. That's not good. And so in exchange for a pardon, Rambo agrees to a solo infiltration mission to rescue a few remaining US POWs after the Vietnam War, where he is only meant to take photos. You think he's going to do that? I don't think Stallone's going to just take photos. I've seen the man. I've seen the man in many movies. He's not a photographer, and not to rescue the prisoners or engage the enemy. But Rambo ignores this and does exactly what you expect because it's 1985, and that's just when you shot everybody and saved everything. So that's what this movie, the game, is based off of, and a lot of the plot, I guess, is in some ways telegraphed through the dialogue in the game. You do actually have like NPCs that you can talk to and communicate with. So that's pretty cool. And the gameplay is really similar to Zelda 2. So if you've played Zelda 2, it's a side-scrolling action RPG, similar to Zelda 2, where you get the numbers that pop up over enemies when you kill them. That's the experience you're gaining, and you can level up certain weapons. You can level up the amount of health you have, stuff like that. And enemies can be killed for experience points, obviously, early in the game. They're very low experience, and then as you get later, you can get a lot more experience per fight. And it's definitely a challenging game to navigate. You can walk off the screens to the left or the right. There's also these portals, doorways, whatever you want to call them, that always say north or south, and you have to press, I think, up or down to go through them. But you have to kind of try and keep track of where everything is in your mind, maybe even make a map or something like that.
And a lot of them don't let you go back the way you came, which is probably the most frustrating part.
Oh yeah, that's not great. You hate to see that for sure.
Sometimes I remember one time I was walking across a bridge and I voluntarily jumped off the bridge because I saw a portal that went.
Because your friends were doing it, weren't they?
Yeah, I mean, as soon. if your friends were jumping off a bridge, would you do it? Well, yeah. I mean, that's where the north-south portal was.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I jumped down and took the portal and then realized I was back where I started and that I couldn't go back to that room. And I was so frustrated. So
Yeah, it's the worst when you can't go back the way you came, for sure. So kind of a hard game to navigate. It's not a straightforward, left to right platformer at all. There's a lot of exploration, there's a lot of figuring out what to do. But obviously a lot less cryptic than Conan. You talk to NPCs and they generally tell you kind of what you're looking for, what you're trying to do at least. And the best thing is the Japanese version has an anger meter instead of an experience meter, which objectively makes it the best version.
yeah, it's probably because of the fact that in Japan, the movie Rambo First Blood Part 2 is actually called Rambo Ikari no Dashutsu, which translates to angry escape. So the word anger was in their title, so they put an anger meter. And at the box of the game exclaims in Japanese, a hellish battle game where man's anger explodes. So
Nailed it, Japan. You knew exactly what we were looking for.
yeah, there's a lot of interesting sort of little Japanese twists in this game. So like on the title screen of the game, it says "rend the feeling of heart with painful feelings." Sure. And at the end of the game, when you beat the game and you've gone back to your home base or whatever, all of your weapons don't fire bullets anymore. They fire a giant anger kanji. And if you shoot, what's the guy's name? The friendly captain. I don't remember his name anymore. But if you shoot him with the anger kanji, he turns into a frog. So this is a very Japanese game.
Sure. I mean, that happened in the movie, I'm sure.
I don't know. Oh, Murdoch, that was his name.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know whether or not Japan was fully aware that this movie was not at all a comedy, but they seem to have had some appreciation for it, or at least were just so tired of working on the game and tired of Rambo that they just were making fun of it. So
to be fair, it's 1985. Imagine yourself living in Japan. You see a film with Sylvester Stallone in it. You view his acting. You take it in, and you have to think, oh, this is a funny movie, right?
I mean, what else can you assume from a man who's being given a pardon for crimes and is using that opportunity to go and shoot people in another country?
Yeah, my favorite thing in the movie. Well, no, not my favorite thing in the game. The favorite thing in my game is the song, for sure, and we'll talk about that.
The song is
but
a banger.
The open mouth face on the game over screen. It screams like Stallone yelling Adrian at the end of Rocky 1. Like you can see that Italian accent thing coming through Stallone right there with the mouth open. It's perfect. It's great. I'm gonna get it tattooed on my forehead, so it's definitely great.
It's a good look.
Let's do some quick reviews, right?
Sure.
So the graphics, I like the graphics. I think it's charming. It's obviously not like super advanced, but this game did come out a little bit earlier than Conan, and it looks worlds better than that. It clearly was stealing a lot of ideas and assets from Zelda 2, but the sprites look good. I mean, nothing's gonna blow you away, but there's some interesting boss variation, interesting level variation. It's not terrible, right?
Yeah, I think that the game looks great. Every time you're in a conversation with someone, it pulls up this dialogue screen where you get to see both their faces, and those are sort of interestingly animated. The game at least communicates to you its expectations, even if it's impossible to navigate. So, like, giving you those little tiles that tell you when you can move either north or south, those kind of things are nice. The game has a lot of visual distinction. So, when you enter a new area, it's very visually obvious that you've entered a brand new area. There's a lot of good stuff to like, I think, graphically.
Absolutely. Yeah, two things that chat pointed out that I just want to mention real quick, because we joked about this when we played it in person this weekend, is in the beginning, he asks you, I guess Murdoch asks you if you want to go on a mission, and like you can say no, right? But then like, what does he say when you say no? I'm trying to remember.
So you have he says, do you want to go on this mission, basically, and your answer is either like, yes, I want to help my country, or no, I prefer it in prison. And if you say
I prefer prison, that's right.
And if you say no, I prefer prison, then he says, okay, but the game can't start until you say yes, and then it asks you the question again.
It breaks the fourth wall real hard there, just to be like, okay, kid, you're already failing. This is literally just the first dialogue box. Also, I forgot that this kind of goes into graphics, but the bosses' heads get real big, so you can see who they are in the movie, which is kind of terrifying to see. But like, if you're fighting a boss and you attack it, like the head will blow up enough that you can see who is what actor it's supposed to be, or whatever character in the movie is supposed to be. So that's kind of strange, but pretty cool. The music. So I don't know if there's more than one song. I don't know if there's more than one song in the world at this point because all I can hear is the Rambo song. It is, as the kids say, a banger. It's so good. It's just so
The
good.
Rambo song is strong. I mean, let's just be honest. The Rambo song is really, really strong.
It will be reflected in my rating. I'll just let you know that right now. But it is just so good. I mean, there's other tunes in between, like when you're talking to people, whatever. It's got good music, but I mean, really, they knew they hit a home run, and they just sat back to marvel it. They said nobody will get sick of hearing this for several hours, and the answer is you shouldn't, or you're a bad person. So,
Okay.
controls.
I think this game controls. I mean, I'm someone who really enjoyed Zelda 2, so
Hmm.
that I think that's sort of reflected here because it controls a lot like Zelda 2. It's a little less slidey, but at the same time, I think more or less the controls are very similar. You've got similar type of jump mechanic. When you jump and attack, you do this cool kick, which makes it really easy to clear enemies in your path. It controls really well. I think my only concern was just sometimes it was hard for me to figure out how to use an item after leaving the menu. But I think
Sure.
that was more just like my frantic desire to like use a potion before I died or something like that made sometimes the controls feel frustrating. But it was literally just I would forget what button to press.
Yeah, it's an interesting game in terms of the controls. I would say when you're comparing it to Zelda 2, obviously the combat system is not anywhere near as complex as
Mm-mm.
Zelda 2. Zelda 2 has a really interesting combat system that we talked about back in episode 7 or whatever it was. It was our first listener episode actually. Um Also, the knockback can be really frustrating and get knocked in between enemies a lot. It's just they can be hidden a little bit, like in the water or whatever. So the knockback can get really frustrating if you're playing this for the first time, but for the most part, it controls really well. I think gameplay wise, it does have like a large variety of weapons that you can use, which is cool. It does have this leveling up system.
You
It
don't
does
get a
have,
lot of those weapons until later in the game, though.
yeah.
Sadly.
Well, that's probably to imitate the movie, right? I assume,
Sure.
first he was just trying to figure out how to use the camera. I'm sure that took Sylvester Stallone at least an hour of the movie.
Yeah.
And then he was like, well, I'm just going to shoot someone. I know how to use this. So, that's probably what happened. I'm assuming. But, no, I think there's a good variety of gameplay. There's actually, if you just watch the speedrun, you miss out on a lot of the content of the game because there's a bunch of different bosses. There's a big spider boss. There's a guy in a motorcycle you fight. There's a helicopter that rains down bombs on you, which is kind of the final boss. So there's a lot of cool stuff in this game, and it involves a lot of exploration. You can enjoy leveling up and getting more health, getting more potions, stuff like that. So it's got some depth to it for sure, and I think the dialogue kind of is a nice touch, not only just to kind of direct where your gameplay is going, but also to tie it into the source material and make you feel like, oh, I'm playing Rambo. Whereas Conan did none of that, right? You didn't.
Right.
I mean, it gave you a 9-page book to read that made no
And
sense, and
even
then that
then, you
was
couldn't
it.
figure out that it was a Conan game.
Yeah.
It wasn't
So
until the game said Conan on it that I knew it was a Conan game. That was it.
yeah, for the last couple points, I would say this game is fairly difficult for sure. Casually, it can be punishing. The enemies really ramp up in terms of the damage they deal to you. If you've used up a bunch of your potions, you might have to go grind to get some. I think some enemies drop them
Yeah.
sometimes. I don't know which
There are
ones
there are
specifically.
some drops.
But it's not an easy game whatsoever. Also, like we said, it's a bit cryptic as to what to do. Even if oh, my goal is to go find this guy, that doesn't necessarily help you gameplay wise to know where that guy is or what to do. So it's a difficult game for sure. It's not something you're probably going to pick up and beat in an hour or even 2 hours maybe. But yeah, other than that, I mean, the replayability's. I mean, it is just a platform or whatever, but it is, I guess, an expansive enough video game that there's more stuff to do. There's also a lot of optional bosses, which you just might not even find. So that's
Oh, really?
cool. I mean, I remember back when we did the speedrun, Zaki Draghi used to do an all bosses speedrun, which was cool because there were a lot of different bosses you just don't see in the speedrun. And I believe some of them are not required to beat the game, but I think every boss you beat, you gain on 100 health capacity. So you start off the game with 100 health and a bunch of potions, and I think every boss you beat, that goes up to now 200 health, 300 health. So
Gotcha.
the game can be made a lot easier when you beat all the bosses, but a lot of them are not necessary. So that's kind of cool. You can explore a bit and find different things. You find this giant spider in a cave, and that gives you an extra 100 health, stuff like that. There's a lot of different weapons to try, but I mean, for 1987, 1988, I mean, that's pretty solid, I would say. I mean, there's definitely more expansive games that generated more gameplay, but I think for a Rambo licensed title, this is definitely a deeper and more interesting game than you'd expect it to be. You'd expect either a side-scrolling run and gun or some sort of light gun kind of game, or with the cursor on the screen where you're just shooting people. Like that's what the Sega Master System game was like a light gun game. They really tried to make something out of this. Did they? I mean, they stole a lot of ideas. I mean, a lot of them. But it was an interesting way to steal them, right? I mean, I would never think, oh, let's make Rambo 2 a lot like Zelda 2. I never would have thought about that. So
I don't think anyone would have ever thought that. I mean,
I still don't think that.
There were other versions of Rambo that had come out slightly before this. I don't remember the other name for it when it released in Europe, but there was one version of Rambo that was, I think, for the Commodore 64 and ZX Spectrum and those consoles, but it was essentially just like a commando.
That's what you would expect, I feel like. Or I think the SMS ones, you either got a light game, a run and gun, a top-down shooter, something of that ilk is what you expect. So when you get a game that has experience and dialogue and, you can level up, it's cool. It's not what I expected at all, or probably what a lot of people still expect. I'm sure there's a lot of collectors out there collecting for the NES, never heard of this game. It's fairly common. So you buy the game, you pop it in, you're like, oh wow, I was not expecting Zelda 2. Like you're expecting just a mailed in version of, like you said, Commando or something. So I think it's really cool that I guess we're a bit more ambitious with this licensed title.
Yeah, you could get away with making Commando, Akari Warriors, Jackal, any of those games and calling it Rambo, and no one would bat an eye at it. So to make a game like this that attempts to actually tell a story, has some RPG elements, and I mean, it's ambitious at least.
For
it
sure.
would be so easy to phone this one in, but I would say that this is about as non-phoned in you can get and still be Rambo.
Okay, so I am going to give it a number. Do you also want to give it a number?
If you give it a number, I'll think of a number.
Okay, I'm giving it a 6. 7 of those points are the song.
Okay.
So, no, I mean, it's an above average game for sure. Like if I am to grab an NES cart off my shelf right now and put it in, I'm probably going to get a game worse than Rambo. I think it's cool. I think it's got some interesting ideas to it. I think it's fun to play. And ultimately, it's not a great game, of course. I don't really think it belongs in a bad games episode, but I think it probably has that reputation or perception enough. But I can't really think of what would be that bad about it. I mean, it's strange. It's certainly strange to take a property like this and turn it into Zelda 2 action RPG. But I think they did a good job with it. And, it's clearly not as good as Zelda 2. I mean, they didn't. No. They didn't reinvent Zelda 2 and make it better. They made, but they did a good job. I think it's a fun game to play. And if I am going to pick a random game to play, most of them would be worse than this.
Yeah, I think I'd say a 6 or a 7 as well. I think that this game is, it's surprising how interesting this game actually ends up being. And I find myself kind of wanting to just play through it, whether as a speedrun or casually. I think it ultimately ended up being an interesting end result, much more than I would imagine wanting to play. I certainly have no interest in playing a clone of Akari Warriors or Russian Attack or any of those types of games that they could have made. But this one on its own is a lot more interesting, and so
absolutely.
I think
they should get points for not mailing it in. I think it's real easy to mail in a licensed title. I think we've proven that with many of our episodes. You look through just the history of licensed video games, and it's generally a mail-in. And when you're copying a game as ambitious as Zelda 2, that's not a mail-in. So I think that's really cool. What's also interesting about this game is that since we decided to do this episode, completely independent of me or Chad or I, the world record has actually changed and a bunch of stuff has been found. So we're going to go ahead and take a quick break, and then we can hop into some of the speedrun stuff that's been really cool going on lately. So this is also a really good speed run. We're talking about Rambo for the NES. It's one that I used to watch years and years ago by a player named Zaki. At the time, Zaki Draghi. Now I believe it's Zaki. I'm not
It was
sure.
then Zaki the Hybrid, and now it's the Shimmering Kinnan or something like that.
Yeah, so Zaki, I'll just reference as Zaki. They've changed their name several times on Twitch. Had the world record for a long time. It was the only person who really had put a bunch of time into it. And as I said, they also used to do all bosses runs, which is kind of a bummer, are not listed on speedrun.com because they were really interesting and it was a completely different speedrunning game. So maybe somebody with some of the new tech that's been found can maybe implement that into there. Who knows? But as of January 2018, Zaki Draghi had the world record at a 21:27 up until January 2018 and used a corner clip to actually skip the final boss of the game. Before then, the final boss was really difficult. It's a helicopter that rains down these bombs, and there's a lot of RNG involved and when you're able to hit it. And it really added a lot of pressure 20 minutes into the run to kill this boss. But that's now just completely bypassed, which is really cool. You bypass most of the bosses in this game. And then Gary Suter, that's
Gary
a
Suter.
lot better. Improved the world record to a 21:22 in February of this year, finding a way to corner clip in the base stage to actually skip a lot of the intended way of traversing the base. The base is a section, I don't know, 15 minutes in the game, maybe later, kind of in the
Yeah.
late game. A lot of different rooms you traverse through. A lot of the enemies take, a decent number of hits and shoot projectiles at you, which are hard to dodge. So finding a way to kind of skip some of that made the game a little bit better, but only a 5-second time save. But White Hat improved the world record to a 1956 at the end of February, just kind of with better execution, probably taking some of these clips into account that were found and improving that. But what's interesting is this most recent 12-hour challenge, the one we were just talking about, Chad doing Star Wars Episode 1 on, and me doing Zen Intergalactic Ninja for, Brosensha, our buddy who does the Kuso Grande tournaments. He
And Big
hosts a
Bad
lot of it.
Game-a-thon.
And Big Bad Game-a-thon, which we'll both be doing runs in
Yep.
coming up, I think, October?
September, I think.
September. We'll announce it closer to when it happens. But really known for loving bad games and Kuso games. He picked up this Rambo run for his 12-hour challenge recently at the end of July, and he discovered a way to clip into a wall without needing a ceiling corner like these other clips required, and open the door basically to find a whole ton of skips in the game, which was really cool. So the world record improved to an 18:33 on August 4th with just less than a week of attempts trying these new techniques and applying them to different parts of the route. And so that's really cool. I mean, that was 2 days ago. So White Hat's been, I don't know how much further he's planning to take it down, if he's going to continue improving it, but it's gotten this new cool clip going on, which is really exciting. Hopefully we'll get more people looking into it, more people trying to run it.
Yeah, basically, previously, if you want, so we talked about how in this game, when you walk to the edge of the screen, it takes you to the next area, and in rooms where they didn't want you to touch the edge of the screen, they would just put like a big wall right in the way, and they could never really do anything about that. But with this new method that doesn't require a ceiling corner in order to clip into the wall, you could just clip into the wall outright with this new method. You can actually climb over those, and it allows a little bit more interesting routing, because some situations where you would go over these walls, they actually do take you to places that will advance your progress rather than having to go around maybe the long way.
Yeah, absolutely. So these clips only work on right walls. Allows you to skip the final boss as well, like we said earlier. But they also allow you to like get up on bridges that you can't really jump up to, and you're supposed to traverse through different areas before you get to it. It's just a real shortcut in a bunch of different parts of the game. And I would venture to assume, not having dived into this
Dive.
most recent run too much, is that I'm sure there's more time to be saved. I mean, this clip was just discovered, a couple weeks ago, so you never know what else could be found in terms of making it interesting for routing and other stuff. The best known task is about an 18:19, which is only 14 seconds better than the world record, but I assume that does not use this clip, which since it was just discovered. So we could see the task bopped possibly coming up this year or something. Really cool stuff.
At first I got really excited because I thought the task had been beaten. By task timing, it's actually in 1838. But then I remember that TAS always uses different timing, so I timed
Yep.
it myself manually, and it's about 14 seconds faster. But I mean, that's still pretty impressive that it's within
Absolutely.
14 seconds of the TAS. There's not a lot of games out there in speedrunning history that have beaten the TAS. Now, that being said, TASs are not infallible. They're still created by humans, but there's often a ton of work that's put into them. So beating a notable TAS, especially for a retro game, can be pretty impressive. Things like the Battletoads task being beaten was a pretty big point of pride for JC back in the day. So things like that are always possible.
Your boy John Carl's here has beaten 2 TASs.
Yeah, you have. You've beaten Double Dragon 2 for the Game Boy and
Double Dragon 1 for Game Boy and Bebe's Kids. Neither
Bebe's
of
Kids.
which I have world record for anymore. The work you put in, and my
It's a
shoulders are
thankless
broad.
job. It's a thankless job, John.
My shoulders are broad. I can carry those that come after me. So there's also a cool trick in this game. So I mean, there's a lot of combat tech that you can kind of just watch if you watch the run, in terms of just trying to, jump and hit enemies at the proper time. There's also kind of an experience route, although I think at this point you basically just don't grind for any experience. You just try and get through everything as quickly as possible.
Especially if you're not fighting any bosses. I mean, who cares?
Yeah. But the what's kind of cool, you start out the game, I think, with, is it 10 or 5 potions? 5 potions. And when you take your final hits to go down to 0 health, you can pause the game. There is a period of time where the game has not recognized you're dead, even though you have 0 health, and you can pause the game and use those potions then. So the speedrun will utilize that to take the maximum amount of damage while traversing the levels, which can be difficult. You take a lot of damage from these different enemies. Enemy movement can be random, and so you want to save every little bit of health. So you'll actually take that last hit of health and then pause at the proper time. The way the menu works is you pause and like select through it essentially, or use the D-pad. I can't remember which, but you pause and then that's how you switch between weapons or switch between anything else, not while you're actually, playing. And you can use the potion then. So it's kind of a cool little trick that, it's kind of stressful doing though, because you're like, if I hit it too late, then I just booted the whole thing.
It reminds me of having speedrun Evo: The Search for Eden, because as soon as you get down to 0 health, there's a very narrow window where you can pull open your parts menu, and if you swap out a part, you get a health refill. And it's like timing that out is very stressful. So
yeah, this is a pretty wide window for it, but it's still a stressful thing. I mean, especially all the times you're getting hit, and you utilize a bunch of the potions in the run. So just kind of an interesting piece of tech. But I definitely recommend watching the run and also just following Brsentia and White Hat to kind of, I guess, monitor this progress. You never know.
Honestly, if you follow our podcast and you don't follow Brsentia, then I don't know how we've captured your attention and he has not, because he's always doing bad video games. I mean, his Cuso Grande tournament, his Bad Games tournament, is always super well attended. It's sort of in the later stages of it now, so it's only getting more interesting. Like, I mean, how did you end up here and never find out about him?
I don't know. You probably love Bad Games. You probably know who he is, but you should follow him. He's a good friend of ours. Also White Hat, we've had to say his name a million times because he is just a world record monster. So
he's such a busy man too. We invited him on the podcast, but he's very tied up in a lot of important business meetings, and unfortunately wasn't able to make it today.
We gave him a full 15 minutes notice. Unfortunately, he was not able to make it. But yeah, this is a game to kind of monitor right now because it's going to be improving. This episode will probably quickly be out of date in terms of the speedrun discussion, at least in terms of world record times, as people are diving into this. And you'll probably also see the other people listed on the leaderboard if they come back to the game, to get a free PB.
We're recording this 9 days before the audio version comes out, and I would wager money that this world record progression discussion will be out of date as of the release of this episode.
Absolutely. So that is a really cool speed run to follow. Auth and I both recommend the game. We both enjoyed it. So I mean, honestly, I don't feel like the drama is in this vote right now. It's kind of like The Bachelorette at the end when there's 2 people left and you know who she's going to choose. You know who she loves. Right. This is kind of like that. First one went to Arnold. Predator is a better game than Cliffhanger, although I do like the Cliffhanger. But this game, I do not like the Conan.
No,
and I love the Rambo.
That's a great point. We are now finding ourselves. Tell me if I'm speaking out of turn. I would hate to do so, but I think we're both in agreement that Rambo is the definitively better game of this matchup, and so it now seems like we're 1-1 between.
It's almost as if a rubber match will be needed down the road to figure out who is the better video game star, Arnold Schwarzenegger or Sylvester Stallone. So I don't know. Maybe look for that. It could be in the plans. You never know. So
Yeah, let us know. Let us know what Stallone game and Schwarzenegger game you think we should match up next. I'm interested in seeing what ones you think would match up well.
because we have plans, we have ideas, but we can be swayed. So I
Absolutely.
also would love for you to hop into the Twitters. That's something I guess the kids are using, and we could do like hashtag Team Stallone or
Mm,
hashtag Team Arnold. Tell us which one of these games is better, Conan
absolutely.
or Rambo. So I want to see your tweets. Hit us up. We love to be interactive. We love to hear from you. We're gonna go ahead and take a quick break, and then because we love to hear from you so much, we're gonna do your Q&A. So as always, we like to answer your Q&A, and we are here live on twitch.tv/theframesavers to do that. We got some cool questions in chat, so we're going to start out with one from a regular listener. Andy J. Retro asks us, if you had to do the sacrilege of recasting these films with current well-known actors, who would they be?
That's a great question. One that
That's a
I'm very
great
glad you
question.
asked. Um,
I think Conan would have to be The Rock. I mean, it would just have to be
okay, sure.
Dwayne Johnson, famed actor. I mean, I think he's kind of taken the Arnold role of like really buff guy that does stuff like this. Although obviously he's a bit better of an actor. Also a native English speaker, which no shots fired on Arnold, but like his acting in 1985 was real rough because his English was real rough, right?
I feel like it
So
made some things just more entertaining, though.
yeah, and it did, and it's impossible to kind of I can't think of any actor that would re-simulate the charm of Arnold Schwarzenegger trying to deliver lines, but I feel like The Rock could really pull off being Conan the Barbarian. You have any that you could think of?
Yeah, so I mean, I feel like either of them. No, no, neither of them. Never mind. I was gonna say Vin Diesel, but he actually doesn't really fit either of them well at
No.
all. I really wanna see Liam Neeson play as Rambo because I could just picture him
Ooh.
doing the whole Taken thing. I mean, I know he's really aging, and that's okay because I love Liam Neeson at whatever age he's at. Hey, Liam Neeson, if you're listening right now, you're
He
doing a great
is.
job, and keep it up. Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna give you one for Rambo. I think Hugh Jackman would be a good Rambo. He's a buff
Oh,
guy. I
okay.
thought of some blonde guys like who's the guy from the stripping movie? Channing Tatum. Channing Tatum. I thought Channing Tatum, but he didn't convince me. But I think Hugh Jackman, or maybe if you want to go like a buff Edward Norton, I could see either
Which
of
one
them
was
being
the
Rambo.
Hemsworth that played a Thor? That played
Chris
Thor.
Hemsworth. Chris
Yeah,
Hemsworth. He could do Conan 100%. He'd
yeah.
be probably a better Conan than The Rock, actually. And The Rock's probably a bit too well spoken to be Conan. Conan can't be like fluently talking about stuff. So, but I could see like a
I
buff, a
really
buff.
want Liam
You,
Neeson to be Rambo now.
if you saw American History X, you saw Edward Norton can get pretty ripped, and I think
Yeah.
that version of Edward Norton could possibly pull it off. But sorry I put these thoughts in your head, my dude. I mean, this Centaur Mickey, it's just I've changed your
Oh,
brain forever, so unfortunately it's tough for you. Our buddy BD Weasel asks, would you play an 8-bit game called Conan the O'Brien? I included this because it made me chuckle almost while we were recording. I love Conan O'Brien. I don't know if an 8-bit game can contain his sprite. He's a very tall man.
I
Have you ever
love
seen him
that.
stand next to anybody?
Yeah, he's huge.
He's probably taller than you, which is almost impossible. I didn't know that was possible.
I
But
saw Tarbash's world record for the emulator version of Conan actually has Conan O'Brien's face behind his splits. And it took me a really long time to realize it because it's like a picture of Conan the Barbarian but with the face swapped. And it took me so long to realize it that it only made the payoff of recognizing it even better.
absolutely, like that sounds like it was like a well transitioned from Arnold body to Conan
Right.
face, which is hard for me to imagine. Some very professional Photoshopper must have been involved in this thing, but that's great. That's what you love to see.
Yeah,
Uh,
Citizen Toaster in chat asks, Link versus Sly Stallone in the squared circle, dot, dot, dot. Which I guess is less of a question, more just a suggestion for us to, spin a tale about. So do
I
you
mean,
think...
here's the thing. What are both of their accomplishments? Let's talk about that. What
Oh,
has Link done?
Link is a lanky little pipsqueak. Don't think that I'm going to actually entertain this thought fully. There's not a chance in hell that Link is going to be able to take on Sylvester Stallone.
Sylvester Stallone ended the Cold War with his fists.
Okay.
He got those people out of the tunnel that was filled with water in
Mhm.
daylight. Nobody watches
Yep.
that movie anymore, but it existed. I mean, he
Single-handedly...
fought in the Vietnam War with a camera. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. He did everything you ask for and more. He did.
Don't think you win a battle just because Link has the Triforce of Courage or whatever nonsense
He has
that
a
is.
sword though. Swords are real good in fist fights. I'm gonna
You
be
don't
real
want to bring a
honest with
sword
you.
to a gunfight, though. I mean, have you?
Guns are good too.
Rambo's got the shooty pow pow.
Yeah, that's tough. That's tough. Sorry, Link. You did your best. And Fitzing Toaster with the hot questions asking also, who is your favorite 80s or 90s cheesecake action star? First of all, you just made me really want to eat some cheesecake. Really love the cheesecake. Apparently not keto friendly. But I mean, mine's Stallone. I liked Arnold a ton as a kid, but I don't know. I loved Rocky
Oh,
so
we're
much.
only allowed to pick between Stallone and
No,
Schwarzenegger?
favorite 80s, 90s actors. It can be anybody, but Stallone's my favorite, and Arnold's my second favorite. So you could go Van Damme. You could go Steve McQueen. We could go further back in time.
Okay, so mine
You could
didn't...
go Seagal.
Mine didn't age particularly well, but I was a really big fan of Chuck Norris, unironically.
Ooh.
Of
course.
I watched a lot of Walker, Texas Ranger with my mother,
course.
and me and my cousin pretty much wore out my VHS copy of Sidekicks with Chuck Norris.
Wow.
That movie's very powerful. When the kid loses an inhaler and he runs home crying with asthma, it really tugged at my heartstrings every single time.
Sure. I mean, I feel like that he hasn't aged poorly. I mean, he's like the only one that's like legitimately a black belt. Like he can actually do the kung fu's.
Yeah,
So I
but he
feel
got like
he's-
really weird, more modern. Like he got super strangely political, and then just became like a hyper meme. Not even
Yeah.
like the normal like Liam Neeson in Taken, where you always
Sure.
hear his lines. It's just like he became
Like-
a next level meme.
Your grandmother has told a Chuck Norris joke at some
Right.
point. So like that's how you know. Like we're way beyond pop culture at that point. So I think that's all of our Q&A. So that was good. I think it's going to be interesting to see who wins out this battle long term over the course of the frame savers. But I mean, I think this one's good in the books. I mean,
Yeah.
Rambo beat it by a lot more than Predator beat Cliffhanger. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, the Siete Siete. That one's in the books.
We will look for Arnold, probably tweeting at us saying, "Hey, Conan the video game had nothing to do with Conan the movie," and our lawyers will be on it. Can't prove it either way. So, if you are looking for more Frame Savers content, or you are going to rapidly be hitting F5 until the next Arnold Schwarzenegger showdown, you can find us at theframesavers.com. That has links to all of our stuff. We also have a Patreon at patreon.com/theframesavers. Shout outs to Tina Hacks, Mr. Pizak, Kip, and Drex, all of which support us at the $25 a month tier. Go follow them all on Twitch. They're great people. And you can support us there. You can also support us by subscribing on our Twitch at twitch.tv/theframesavers. That's where you are now. And you can get fresh emotes like that 0.5 out of 10 that was finally just useful in the rating here. Also, you can find us on Twitter, Discord, all that stuff. Where can people find you if they want to watch you clearly diving into both these speed games soon?
You can find me on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube as Author Blues. How about you? Where can they find you, my friend?
You can find me at John Carls on Twitter and Twitch. You can find me John Carls1 on the YouTubes. Also, shout outs to Brian Morgenthaler, who produces this podcast. Big buddy of ours. You can find him at BMorgs TV on Twitter and Twitch. Also, a shout out to our friends at the Warp World Podcast. They are at podcast.warp.world. If you're looking for other content similar to ours, but kind of with a different spin, they've got Warp World Historians and Warp World. So they have 2 podcasts going on. Go check them out. They're great. And thank you to Author Blues for helping organize the live Q&A.
You're welcome.
Good job.
I would also like to thank Author Blues for helping organize.
This guy's so talented. He can organize Q&A and just drop hot knowledge on you at the same time. Unbelievable. So we are going to have a rubber match, but until then, we'll see you later.
Peace.